Here we go with video 7 of the Stone Woman presentation. This is video 7 of 12 total videos, and we're talking about the ancient conspiracy and the ancient covenant, and we're working our way up to how that is playing out right now in our day, and why that's kind of the explanation of why things are off and weird in the world right now. So in the last video, in video 6, we covered how the tribe of Judah went and conquered Jerusalem, and the tribe of Joseph went and conquered Bethel, the Jacob's Pillar location, St. Louis, Missouri. And then we see that King Solomon, the son of King David, starts to build in, we got to where we were going to start to talk about him building the house of the Lord, the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. And that's what we're going to be looking at in video 7 right here. King Solomon, the Mason. In the last video, we learned about his wisdom and how wise he was, and God blessed him with wisdom, and that the Jerusalem location was a location promised to Solomon and David and all of their seed. So continuing with that, video 7, we're going to talk about a house for the Lord right here. And it does definitely say house of the Lord in the text, but the reason I say for the Lord is because, like we explained on it, touched on in last video, and we'll touch on again in this video, this is a house that's being built for the Lord, but it's not his throne location. It's not his house of God location. It's a house for the Lord. It is a house of the Lord, but it's a place when he wants to go visit Jerusalem and hang out there for a little bit. King Solomon's building a really nice place for him to dwell in, to live within while he's there in Jerusalem. But the Bethel location, the promise that was promised to Abraham, and then to Jacob, who's Israel, and then to Joseph of Egypt, that whole succession, that line, that lineage, they were promised the Bethel location. Also all the land of Canaan, the rest of it as well, the promised land, but specifically there's a central spot that they were promised, which is this city called Bethel, which means house of God, or as it says numerous times in the text, at the beginning it was called Luz, which means light. This is where Jacob's pillar's at, the vertical ladder, the gate between heaven and earth. That's that very, very special location. Also, Jerusalem is a special location. It's a holy city, and it's a place where God said, David and Solomon, this is the spot for you and your seed forever, which is the tribe of Judah. And I forgot to mention this in the last video, but that's what's known as the Jews. The tribe of Judah living in Jerusalem, that's the tribe, that tribe of Judah is also known as the Jews. So we have King Solomon and the temple being built in Jerusalem for the tribe of Judah, also known as the Jews. And then separately, there's the Bethel location, which is where Abraham and Jacob and Joseph of Egypt were specifically promised. And that's where Jacob put his pillar at. That's the gate between heaven and earth. That's that special location marked with Jacob's pillar. And we just saw that the tribe of Joseph conquered that city. So you got the tribe of Judah, the Jews, in Jerusalem, and then you got the tribe of Joseph in Bethel, and then there's also the other tribes that are in other locations as well within the promised land. So now let's talk about this house of the Lord that King Solomon builds. He oversees the entire construction of it, and it's oftentimes called King Solomon's temple. It's not actually his temple, it's a temple he's building for the Lord, but it's just referred to as King Solomon's temple because he's the king at the time and he's the one overseeing the construction of it. So 2 Samuel 7:13 says, just a reminder here, this is God speaking to David and saying, David, I'm going to have your son Solomon build a house. And it says that right here, he shall build a house for my name, referring to Solomon, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So again, just reminding us that God promised David and Solomon a throne location, their seed, their kingdom, their throne, Jerusalem. That's what that city is. But he's not saying, I want you to build a house for my throne, for my location, God speaking. He's saying, David, Solomon, this is your spot. But the spot that God talks about as like his throne location, the house of God, the gate between heaven and earth, that's the Bethel location where currently the tribe of Joseph is at. And throughout this video 7, I'm going to mention several times the tribe of Joseph being the tribe in Bethel, because that's going to be a piece of information we're going to need to hang on to for some upcoming things that I'm sharing throughout this presentation. So now let's talk a little bit about the weight, the materials and the symbols that are used to construct King Solomon's temple, and also the weight of all those materials. As I mentioned previously in another video, weight matters a ton, like a lot, pun intended, I guess. Like it matters tons and tons and tons, because there is no magical way to move weight. So if you've got super heavy stones, how are you moving them? There's got to be some real ways to do that. And masons who know how to deal with super heavy stone and transport heavy stone, stack heavy stone, it's the whole process, the whole supply chain. They have to be good at it. And we see right here in 1 Kings 5:17, the king commanded, that's Solomon, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and huge stones to lay the foundation of the house. Huge stones, costly stones, huge stones. Big stones right here. And we're going to learn a little bit more about these stones, but already right here, okay, they are moving tremendous amounts of weight. This is the same how'd they build the pyramids discussion. All this stone architecture that the Old Testament is talking about, that we can see some of those leftovers even in the United States, the land called the United States of America right now, because that is the Old Testament land, as I've laid out in previous videos. There's no magic answers here. If they're moving really heavy weight, they've got some very efficient ways to do so. Machinery, water travel is definitely a great way to do it. Cranes, tractors, like they have real machinery to be able to do this stuff. And so how do they move the weight? In the next video, I'm gonna really go into, okay, here's a good look at how they were moving the weight. It's not magic, they just had real ways of doing it. That's gonna be the next video. 1 Kings 5:18 says, Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, referring to the stones and the stone squares. So they prepared timber and stones to build the house. And again, if all this talk of stones wasn't important, it wouldn't be in the book of law. It wouldn't be in the Old Testament. It wouldn't be in the scriptures. It wouldn't be in the word. But for whatever reason, whether it's the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, it's constantly going stones, 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 stones. It's constantly telling us stonework. It's constantly talking to us about masonry. Right here we see that there's Solomon builders, and then there was another main builder on the project whose name is Hiram, and he's inside the Freemasonry religion, they talk a lot about Hiram. I'm not going to really talk much about him, just sharing that for whatever it's worth. But right here we got builders, stone squares, working with timber and working with stones. I'll show you a little bit of timber. Of course, they worked with timber. Like, it's a great material to use, and it's a beautiful material to use alongside stone. So they're not just stone masons. They're not just constructing with stone, also with timber, and also a bunch of other materials as well, which we'll read about in just a second. 1 Kings 6:7, and the house, when it was in building, was built of stone, made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer nor axe nor tool of iron heard in the house while it was in building. So that's a really interesting thing, that King Solomon's temple, they prepared, like, all the noisy work was prepared off-site, and then once the stone got to site, it was like probably near silent construction is maybe a way to think about it, but there were no banging tools that you were hearing on site. So again, how are they doing that? Well, cranes and lifting stones and just stacking them real nice and neatly, and not having to bang stuff out. Just very much possible. Again, there's no secret sauce here. They probably were just using cranes or something like that. Talk about that more in the next video, but just to say, there's no secret sauce. And the story we're told about, oh, how'd they build the pyramids? There must be some magical way. Or they just had similar stuff to what we have now for moving weight around, but bigger and better, and they were more masterful at it. And that's really all the secret is. The secret is someone's lying to us about how these people actually lived and built. They were rich and prosperous, and they weren't in dirt, and they weren't poor dirt rag people. Like, they were rich, they were prosperous, they were moving around tremendous amounts of weight. If you look at how all the stuff we have to do to move weight around, you got to have some real machinery and all that. So anyways, next video about the weight, just showing you they're seriously working with stone right here. So back to this Freemasonry book, a couple things to pull out of here real fast. The traditions, glyphics, and ritual of Freemasonry cluster around the building of the temple. So this King Solomon's temple, this project that's taking place right now in the Book of Law, in the Word, the Old Testament, it's a huge piece of Freemasonry, and the symbolism around it is a huge piece of the symbolism that they use. And part of that is because what it takes to build masterfully and beautifully out of super heavy stone, you got to have all the principles, all the information. You got to be really exact and precise and masterful and perfect at doing it. Same thing applies to the spiritual side of things. So it says right here, It has for its base the existence of God and the immortality of the soul. Remember, we talked about soul being the living man. So the immortality of the living man, meaning man as we are now, we can live forever. Not that we're not going to die, but that's the whole Jesus Christ died and resurrected thing, is that's available and for all of us. Like, we'll all be resurrected as well. The immortality of the soul, the immortality of the living man, man living forever after death. It recognizes man as the living temple of God, that temple which was built without sound of hammer or any noise whatsoever. It recognizes the Christos, or Christ, as the living principle of the soul of man, and without it which no one can be immortal. So a couple things to dissect right here. It's saying that man is the living temple of God. So there's this physical structure, King Solomon, super heavy stone being built, got to be masterful, have all the information and knowledge on how to do that, have the patterns for it. We'll talk about that in just a second, and where those patterns and blueprints for all this construction actually came from. That's the physical, but then the spiritual side is, and it's related to physical still because man is physical, but it's saying that man is the living temple in which the Spirit of God can dwell within. And so here's this physical temple made out of stones for God to come dwell within, but then man is the living temple of God that God's Spirit can literally dwell within. And that's true. And like, look, our spirits are in our bodies, and then the only other spirit that should be in there is God's Spirit. But it is actually also possible for devils and unclean spirits, that's which is in the text in the Bible, in the book of law, they can also enter if allowed, if invited in. And that's, obviously not a good thing, which we'll talk more about that in an upcoming video. But the living temple of God, man's body, our bodies are literally designed to be the temple for God's Spirit to come dwell within. So his Spirit should be dwelling within us. But we do need information and what are the principles that we need to live and abide by in order for God's Spirit to dwell within, because he doesn't want to come dwell within inside of a mucky, gross, nasty place. This is God we're talking about. Of course, he, when he jumped into his physical body, Jesus Christ, he did go hang out with poor people and people that were sick and all of that. But when we're talking about like a house of God, King Solomon's temple, there's specific patterns in that he wants to see built so that he can come exist and be within a really, really nice place, a place that's suitable for God. Then the same thing applies to our bodies and how we're supposed to be living, and we're supposed to be abiding by certain principles and so forth, so that his Spirit can come dwell within us. And it says that Freemasonry recognizes the Christos, or Christ, as the living principle of the soul of man, and without which no one can be immortal. So the thing that allows us to become immortal, just like I was saying, Jesus Christ died, resurrected, that's real, and it was the real him conquering death so that he can give all of us that same gift so that we can be resurrected and made immortal. So that's one of the connections here with the spiritual side of things and the physical side of things in King Solomon's temple, is it's this masterful temple being built for God to come dwell within. We need to be building and taking care of ourselves in such a way, and our bodies are already designed for it so that God's Spirit can come dwell within us. 1 Kings 6:22, the whole house was overlaid with gold. The whole altar by the oracle overlaid with gold. So just incredible amounts of gold, the whole thing being overlaid with gold. These aren't poor dirt people. And when it says the whole house was overlaid with gold, this is like a very large complex, I think we're talking about, like a complex of several different buildings, not just one. And I think the depiction, like the model that we're shown of King Solomon's temple nowadays, I'm just going to go inaccurate, it's deceptive, probably much, much bigger and grander than that. And here's a little way I think you can look at that and kind of glean that information from the text right here. It says 1 Kings 8:5, they were sacrificing sheep and oxen, and there was so much sheep and oxen that they could not be told nor numbered for multitude. Okay, that's a lot of livestock, and oxen are very, very large animals. Sheep, not so large, but I mean, they're large enough to take up a ton of room. And if there's so much that you can't even count them, well, how big is this temple place that's being built to house such a large amount of livestock? 2 Chronicles 7:5 also mentions that King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 20 and 2,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. 120,000 sheep, 22,000 oxen. That's a ton of livestock. Again, you got to have a seriously large structure to be sacrificing that amount of animals. And once again, oxen are very large animals. So I just think, once again, we're seeing there's this picture, this image that we've been shown, poor dirt people. And even when it depicted Solomon's temple, yeah, it's a little bit nice, but I still think it's been dumbed down like all these other things we've been reading about. The image that we picture in our mind is just dumb, I think, has just been intentionally and deceptively dumbed down. And I think if we actually take the text more for what it's saying, it's not poor dirt people kind of moving around a few stones and making something work. Like, this is the most masterful stuff. And where these designs and patterns came from, we'll talk about in just a second. Another way you can look at it is like, they say, oh yeah, this is how long a cubit was, because they measure things out in cubits in the text. And so I just don't think it's accurate. Whatever they say what a cubit is, and then you take that and that you build the temple off of that measurement. Whatever interpretation of the measurements and what the temple is nowadays, and that they come up with that model that they show us, I think is just ultimately deceptive. 1 Chronicles 29:2. Now we learn a little bit more about some other materials that they're using. So far it's been super heavy stones, and there's been a lot of gold, and then also timber. But now we learn about gold for things to be made of gold, silver for the things of silver, brass for the things of brass, iron for the things of iron, wood for things of wood, onyx stones and stones to be set, glistering stones, which means like shining, sparkling stones, and stones of diverse colors, and all manner of precious stones, and marble stones in abundance. Dude, to be working with these materials, to be hauling these materials around, to be pulling them out of the earth, stacking them super high as part of super heavy, strong stone structures, masterful, complete masters of masonry and architecture right here. Gold, brass, silver, iron, wood, and then all these different stones, onyx stones, shining stones, stones of diverse colors, all manner of precious stones, and marble stones in abundance. So nowadays, when we see some of these buildings, like I've explained earlier, most of them are just stripped and pillaged. There's still a little bit left on them and in them, but for the most part, most of these stone leftover ancient buildings all over the land we call now United States of America, which is the promised land that the Old Testament talks about, all these buildings nowadays are just like old gray stone. That's not what all this was when it was first built. They got precious stones, shining stones, stones of diverse colors, all manner of precious stones. So all the precious stones, they've got all of them. And then also marble stones in abundance, and there's a bunch of different kinds of marble. And all of this is tremendously heavy and difficult to work with, and they're doing it easy, no problem. So once again, these aren't poor dirt people. These are very rich, advanced people building advanced architecture. Some other things it talks about, I just pulled some of these in. I'm sure I'm missing a few here, but just to make this a little quicker than showing you all of the verses, some more things that were made out of straight gold: altars, tables, candlesticks, lamps, tongs, bowls, snuffers, basins, scoops, censers, and hinges. And what all of those exactly are, not sure, but I think we can see some of them, and I'll show you in just a second, engraved in stone on these huge stone structures all over our country. So Independence, Missouri right here, you got this bowl or vase type of design right here with flowers spinning off of it. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing, is whatever these snuffs and censers and candlesticks and all that kind of we just read about that comes from the Old Testament. I think we're seeing those symbols all over our buildings, all over our stone buildings, all over the country. And why? Like I showed you in the very first video, I flash Adidas logos and Chick-fil-A logos, and you know exactly what they are. But when we come and look at these permanently made out of stone symbols and logos all over these extremely heavy stone buildings all over the country, it's like, we have no idea what they mean. But then when you come into this Old Testament book of law, the word, well, now it starts to make a little bit more sense what these things are. Another one in Independence, Missouri. So you can see the pillars, we got the triangle shape up top, and then right here in the middle, you've got like some curtains hanging and like some different types of flowers. Right here, you've got a pillar. This is in Provo, Utah. And if we zoom in right here, again, some sort of that bowl vase type of things with like wreaths and flower work spinning off of it. This is in Fresno, California. So if we look down here, 2 types of candlesticks or something on the side with a wreath in between it, some ribbons flowing off of it, and inside of the fruit wreaths we've got pomegranates and grapes and lilies, which we'll talk about in just a second. Up here, same thing. I don't know exactly what material this is, maybe copper. It looks like it kind of has that green patina, that copper, that happens to copper over time. But it looks like, again, we got this candlestick thing in the middle, some flowers shooting off of it, and then some more candlesticks off to the side of it. And then right here in Santa Monica, California, same thing again, these interesting types of vases and candlesticks depicted right here. And then all this interesting flower work up here up top with a huge shield also. Salt Lake City, Utah, same thing. We're seeing some sort of vase type of thing, some candlestick type structures on the side of it, and some sort of wreath hanging on it with all the fruits and the flowers that are mentioned in these stories right here in the word, in the text, in the book of law. Well, here it is. And nowadays, a lot of our colors, I don't know if these colors are original. They may or may not be, but I think I have been to some places where there still is some of the original color, and it is this type of color, which are different types of colors than we use nowadays. Our colors are very like bold and strong and kind of like jump out at you, like neon signs and stuff like that. But these colors right here, and the colors that you'll often find in these buildings when there is still color left on them, because like I said, they just, a lot of them stripped and pillaged to where everything just looks gray now, or white, because sometimes they paint a lot of stuff white to make it look new. But these colors are just very calming and subtle and very, very pretty. And like they kind of speak to you in certain ways, and they're just very, very nice to look at. Where nowadays, I don't know, our colors are just like a lot harsher than this. Salt Lake City, Utah, inside the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. I've shown you this before, but you got the eagle with a wreath, and then you've got these different types of flowers, and you've got what I think are cherubims right here. I don't know a whole lot about cherubims, to be honest, but I think maybe this is like a depiction of cherubims or something like that. Little angels, something like that. This is inside the Utah Capitol in Salt Lake City. I think this is maybe like we got some brass and gold going on in here, but just look at all these designs and the intricacy and these materials. And this is one of the places, if you walk inside there, like I don't know if they still have the exhibit up. They used to have an exhibit up where they talked about some of the different stones that were used for this building, and it's some of those same stones we just read about, onyx stones, and it's really interesting. San Diego, California, all this just candlestick with this eagle on the top of the bowl that's on the candlestick with all this wreath work shining off of it, flowing out of it. And then you got these ships right here that are also tucked in there, just all in perfect engraved stone. Pittsfield, Massachusetts, here you've got this type of stone lamp right here. Provo, Utah, got the same type of stone lamp thing right here. And I think this knowledge is power. Those words are just new words that were scratched into it, but this looks like original stonework. It also mentions pillars of cedar tree, almig tree, and brass. And so I thought I'd just play this right here. This is from the Iowa Capitol building. And if you look right here, you can see all the different types of marble that are used. And we just read they had different types of marble in abundance. And that's just what we see. Like, this is incredible, different types of marble right here. Super beautiful, super heavy. Inside of the Iowa Capitol building, which I've showed you a few times, is just mind-blowing architecture. Like, look at this. The timber that you can see in here is really, really amazing as well. Like those I lied. Those handrails are marble handrails. Marble handrails. So anyways, but there is also a really nice timber in there. This is inside of the California Capitol building, so Sacramento, California. You see we've got these marble pillars right here. And then you've got more wreath work in stone right there. And then you have ancient civilizations depicted right here, which my take on these is these are actually original. And I think the cowboys and the coal miners, the gold miners of California, they got nothing to do with this type of stuff. So like, why is all this stuff here? And if they're just putting around trying to pan flakes of gold out of a river and are just starting to plant crops to be able to feed themselves, like this type of stuff is nowhere near, they're not even thinking or considering building Capitol buildings with marble pillars and wreaths of stonework and all these intricate stone flowers right here, and then also all these ancient Egyptian looking civilizations depicted right here. Venice Beach, California. So here's an example of how they just like to paint stuff white because it looks new. But this is just old stone architecture. Amazing pillars right here with the flower work on top, and then little ancient faces inside of all that flower work. You've also got chapters of molten brass that it talks about, which I think chapters is some of this type of stuff right here, something like that. But you can see that, like, look at it. I think some of this is brass and some of this is gold right here. This is inside the Iowa State Capitol. And then if we look down here, marble pillar, marble pillar, marble pillar, marble pillar. And then if we look at the ground right here, they didn't have any stone for roads. They couldn't pave roads. They didn't know how. They weren't skilled enough, but they did all of this. So make it make sense, I guess. It also talks about cherubims, and cherubims made of olive trees. So again, just what I think might be some cherubims depicted, because also you'll see alongside all these censers and bowls and candlesticks and wreath work with all the pomegranates and figs and stuff that are mentioned, you also see these little babies with them with wings. And I think, that could be cherubim. We got another one up here, some sort of little winged man type looking angel thing with wreaths flowing out of it. Same thing here. We see these angels with wings, and we see more of these bowls, these vases type of things come down here. Now we've got lions with wings, and then we've got this ancient face right there, all engraved out of stone. This is in downtown Fresno, Utah Capitol building, Salt Lake City, Utah. Inside the Capitol, some gold cherubim, I guess, right there. And then if you look at the background, this one is where I'm not sure, like, if this is original or not. I kind of lean towards it not being original, because if it was, maybe they'd be depicting these more as like real pyramids, but they're kind of showing them more in ruin right here, which is how we're taught to look at the pyramids from the Old Testament and those time periods nowadays. But either way, you can see there's pyramids depicted in the background, like interlocking, like layered and stacked. And then it also mentions doors of gold and fir tree overlaid with brass. So we got like just more amazing architecture right here. I haven't found any straight gold doors, but just some cool doors that I think are worth showing that I have come across. Again, inside the Nebraska State Capitol right here. I have showed you this door before previously, but if we now look at these humongous marble pillars that are right here at the entrance, and then this door, each side is 750 pounds each, I was told, so extremely heavy doors. If you're just living in dirt cabins, putting around in dirt, trying to get things going, I don't think you're building 750 pound doors that look like this with an Egyptian eagle right there in the middle of it. And these people right here, we'll start to talk about a little bit in this presentation. At best, we would consider these to be Native American Indians, but we'll talk about who the Native American Indians actually are, and that'll make more sense when you look at something like this. These are some doors I found in Provo, Utah, where it just has very nice woodwork. These are super heavy, really nice wood doors with some very, very interesting animal life carved into them. Some of the animals, look like animals that we know of today, that we use today, but then some of them are like, that doesn't really make sense. What are those animals, So interesting, looks like could very well be some ancient doors to me. Entire interior overlaid with gold. We talked about that earlier, but just so much gold in all of these buildings. So here's a look up at the main dome of the Iowa Capitol building. I've shown you this one a few times, but so much gold and brass and marble pillars right here. And there's like several levels of it all the way to the top of the dome. So right here you can see like brass and iron work for railings, marble pillars topped with like those gold flowers, everything brass and gold, all these gold statues everywhere you look right here. And then if you just keep going up towards the top, now nearing the top of the dome, you've just got more stone marble pillars just completely surrounding it. It's just mind-blowing architecture when you really stop and look at it and think about it, and then consider the stories we're told about it and the weight of it, and just it all doesn't really make a lot of sense. But then when you come into the scriptures, the book of law, the word, you read about their stuff, their materials, what they were building, and if you can piece together which land that is, well, now it starts to make sense that there could have very well been advanced civilizations that built like that already living here before us, and some of their buildings still exist, and we're just told different stories about them. by the ancient conspiracy, and we'll start to talk a little bit more about that in this video as well. It also mentions gates and porches and courts, parlors, chambers, treasuries, throne, holy of holies, several different pieces of this. And I don't think, again, this is just like one building and these are different pieces of one building. I think courts, parlors, chambers, treasuries, this is like a huge complex with a lot of different buildings, in my opinion. So if we look inside of the Nebraska Capitol building, I'm not saying this stuff is King Solomon's temple, but I think it's from similar time periods and similar people. It's not from the cowboys and coal miners in the 17 and 1800s. So if we look at the Nebraska Capitol right here, incredible amounts of stonework. Again, just gray stonework. I think a lot of this has been stripped and pillaged already, but you can still see that there's a lot of beauty to it. So this courtyard, these paths leading to a central fountain right there. And these fountains are interesting because a lot of these stories for these buildings is, it was in a time period when they just had outhouses. They didn't know plumbing. They didn't know how to flush away their excrement. And it's like, yeah, but they had amazing fountains attached to all these buildings, blasting up huge fountains of water. And if they were doing that, I don't think they were struggling with flushing away their excrement. Anyway, just another interesting consideration. But this nice, pretty courtyard, just surrounded by this super old, thick stone right here with a beautiful fountain in the middle of it. And then it also talks about intricately carved wood with knops and open flowers. Just some more very interesting woodwork, super heavy woodwork with a bunch of ancient Old Testament symbolism, ram's head, another ribbon and wreath work. And then if we look at the sides of it, you've got these angel wings type things, and then right here you've got pillars depicted, and then I think also flowers, and then I think some of this stuff right here that it mentions is maybe some of that knop work that it just talked about. Another big interesting piece of furniture I ran across where you can see just ancients depicted on it, and it's super, super heavy, beautiful woodwork. This is very different than like IKEA or Amazon assemble it yourself type of furniture. This is very, very heavy furniture. And I think we just have a lot of it floating around that's left over from ancient times, and we just don't really pay attention to it like that. Los Angeles, California, you can see this stonework right here, where again, we've got these vases and these flowers, and it's just keeps going and going and going right there. We've got like an eagle depicted in it, and all of this just ancient stonework symbolism right here on a, look at this building. It's just been basically boarded up like a lot of downtown LA now. Los Angeles, California, again, right here we've got the fasces with a wreath over it. We've got these different flowers, shield right there. If we come down here, we see some more very interesting ancient symbolism engraved permanently in stone on huge stone buildings. Also talks a lot about lions and oxen. We talked about oxen already, but lions. Lions is one. You can find lions engraved in stone on huge stone buildings all over the country. It's one of the most prevalent symbols that I've kept coming across, and that if you go start to look at these buildings, you'll start to see it over and over again. Stone lions over and over and over again. This is in Santa Barbara, California. This last one was in Concord, New Hampshire, the capital city of New Hampshire. This is in Santa Barbara, California. If we look right here, some lions with wings and a shield and some flowery stuff shooting off of them. And you can see that this is engraved permanently in stone as part of this huge stone structure. And then some new people show up and they go, yeah, let's slap a little sign on top of it, like I talked about in the first video of this presentation. And it's just a cheap sign. You can put it up and take it down within seconds. And it's the Santa Barbara Junior High. I do not think this has anything to do with a junior high. I think this is an old ancient building, and someone else slapped a new sign on it and said, now this building has been repurposed as a junior high. And they write a whole story about when it was built and the time period and the architects, and just lies. I think literally these stone buildings all across the country, new stories have been made up that are just lies about these buildings. Kansas City, Missouri, here's a sphinx right here. There's also a big heavy stone sphinx. There's also another one across to this side of it, and between these two sphinxes is this huge tower with priests holding swords surrounding the tower. Men in robes holding swords, sword of truth. Very, very cool spot to go see in Kansas City, Missouri. Utah Capitol Building, Salt Lake City, Utah. big marble lion right there. Also in Salt Lake City, Utah, I believe this is inside the Joseph Smith Memorial Building again. We see these flowers right here, and then these lion heads over and over and over again with flowers flowing out of their mouths. And then, oh, so I got a little video right here I can show you. But it just keeps going, and then you can see the gold underneath it, all that gold trim and everything. Just so many lions everywhere. This is the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon headquarters, and you can see once again just more lions, more stone lion heads, and you can see the pillars down below with all just out of super heavy stone. And then if you come across the street here, this is another look at the the exterior of the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, and you'll see just all this ancient, let me see if I can get back there real fast. Okay, right here you can see just more of this ancient stonework engraved in stone all over this building. Right up here, all this continuation of a bunch of different wreaths. This is in Ogden, Utah, so a little bit north of Salt Lake City, and we've got this huge stone building with these huge lion heads on top of it, and I don't even know what to call these designs, but just more ancient stonework. You can see the smaller lion heads down here at the bottom. This is in Lincoln, Nebraska. I've showed you this tower before. This is a different one than the Kansas City one I was just talking about, but this is a common thing where you'll find huge towers made of stone with robed priests surrounding the towers. And in this case, we also have lion heads here on the bottom, pillars and grapes right there. And then also these little things right here are like little cherubim faces, I guess you could say. It also talks about pomegranates and palm trees and lilies. I've talked already about pomegranates inside of these different wreath work. I think there's also lilies inside of here. You can see these candlesticks and these ribbons. This is in Ottawa, Kansas right here. It also talks about wreaths of gold chain work. So just some more wreaths to take a look at right here in Topeka, Kansas. These are looking very, very old in my opinion. And just on a huge, huge heavy stone building with huge stone pillars out front. Where's all this stone coming from, and why didn't they pave any roads with it? Fresno, California, down here. I don't know what material this is, but some sort of metal, I think. And you've got a shield, wreath work, candlesticks right here. You've got ancient people inside of there. Over here, you've got these type of people depicted. If we come up to the top here, you've got stonework with a shield and what looks like the Boy Scout logo or whatever. Up at the top here, you've got more of those vases type things with flowers flowing out of them. There's an obelisk. It's a little north of Fresno, California. I forgot exactly which city it's in, so it's not exactly in Fresno, but it's close. And you can see on this obelisk right here, this huge stone granite obelisk, you got that wreath right there, that stone wreath as part of it, and then its base is exposed. Oftentimes their bases are covered up with dirt and grass, and it's just called a hill. But for this to stand so perfectly tall, and because it's so heavy, it does need a good strong base on it. And so that's cool that you can actually see the stepped pyramid base right there of it. Fresno, California, so much like just rich symbolism right here. I've already showed you some of it, but again, you can see these lamp or vases, bowls type of things right here with just all sorts of flower work flowing out of it. Hartford, Connecticut, there's this tower close to the Capitol building where you're seeing just a lot of that same symbolism. In her hands right here, she's holding wreaths. Down here by her feet, there's some wreaths. It also talks about molten wheels, and wheels were not foreign to them at all. And here's one of the reasons why, because the text talks about them having molten wheels. They had wheels, and it's another symbol that's depicted in all this stone architecture all over the country. Like right here, we see the stone woman, wheel in her hand. That's Colorado capital. That's Denver, Colorado. This is Los Angeles, California. This is the New York Times building. This is one of my favorite buildings because New York Times, they got nothing, they wouldn't be building this. This is all super, super ancient stonework right here. This is one of my favorite ones I talked about previously, where it's this man wearing the armor of God, holding the sword of truth. You got the eagle of God. God escaped the Israelites out of Egypt on eagle's wings. And then his sword that he's holding, the sword of truth, is stabbing the serpent or the dragon in the head. And if you know about the New York Times and Hollywood and all that stuff, they're not at all interested in stabbing the serpent in the head. They're interested in helping the serpent thrive. This is all beside the point, because really what I wanted to show was just the wheels on this building, but there's just so much other stuff on this building that it's hard not to look at. It's a really, really cool building with some ancient art on it. Fresno, California, you can see right here, this ancient civilization, this man right here is holding a type of wheel, but then there's also another wheel depicted over here, which is exactly how we build wheels, look at wheels nowadays. Like, very, very similar. Not like, it's showing us wheels was not uncommon to them, not foreign to them. Like, it's not that wheels hadn't been invented yet, or like, no, this stuff, they're all the stories about, oh, all this new tech and machinery that we invented nowadays is just recent in the past like couple hundred years. That's just all deception and lie. California capital, Sacramento, California right here. Stone woman, and you can see this guy right over here holding a wheel in his hand. San Francisco, California, chariots right here, wheels, stone people depicted. Just amazing, amazing, super heavy stone architecture. These pillars right here with people inside of the flower work on the top of the pillars, like just outstanding architecture. It also talks about how there was an impressive ascent into, or like up to, the temple. This is on the floor of the Nebraska Capitol building. So Lincoln, Nebraska right here. I previously showed you God holding the rod with the pillar behind him and the big eagle. That was on the floor of the Nebraska Capitol. This is just in a different spot. It's that same very intricate tile work. No stone for roads though. They weren't skilled enough to pave roads. They didn't need to pave roads to move all this weight around. None of that mattered. But you can see that there's this very nice ascent, this big ascent up to this temple type structure right here. It also talks about nets of checker work and a veil of blue, purple, crimson, so some really nice cool colors. And it also talks about window design, creating varying degrees of lighting. So I think this is another beautiful part of this very intentional, super heavy, masterful stone architecture, that a lot of it still exists, is lighting. I think they were masterful when they built this stuff at using light to beautify these structures. This is in New York City. This is the Grand Central Station. From what I've heard now, they built outside of this building new buildings that now block this light from coming in, so you don't see this anymore. But you can see how it just beams these beams of light through, like big beams, but the big beams are full of smaller beams, like really, really gorgeous. And then also in some instances, and maybe in this case right here, which I think was probably the case, if this is stained glass right here, then all this light could be very much different colors of light that are beaming through, because that's one thing that's really cool about stained glass, is if it's set in a certain spot so the sun can shine through it really well, then it'll actually beam down a bunch of different colors of light. Amazing stuff that we don't see in any of the architecture we build nowadays. So let's talk about who the temple designer is, where the blueprints came from, the patterns for how to build all of this. And hopefully you've already pieced that together, but it comes from the Most High Architect, from God himself. So 1 Chronicles 28:11 says, David gave to Solomon the pattern of the porch, the houses thereof, the treasuries, the upper chambers, the inner parlors, and the place of the mercy seat. And then 1 Chronicles 28:19 says, all this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me, even all the works of this pattern. So David received the patterns for how to build everything straight from God, straight from the Most High Architect. And so again, if God himself is handing people designs for how to build a house for himself, not poor dirt people, some of the most masterful, perfect, heaviest masonry that exists. And then let's take a quick read again inside of this book. There's a couple things that I think are worth mentioning. So right here it says, there's a complicated symbolism for Freemasonry that, working in and towards a common center, when taken in conjunction with the building and the restoration of the temple, referring to King Solomon's temple, constitute the secret symbolism of Masonry. So there's all the symbols, and when you take those symbols in conjunction, combine them with the building of King Solomon's temple, you should be able to, if you combine those, use those together, and that's going to help you unpack all the information behind the symbols. And what are the symbols and what's all the information behind it about? Come down here and it says, these symbols, when correctly interpreted, serve two purposes. First, they reveal the complete philosophy of the creation of the universe and of man. And then secondly, the uninterrupted evolution of man. So the symbols taken in conjunction with King Solomon's temple, now you can start to unpack the information behind them. And the information that exists behind all these symbols is the creation of universe and of the man. Like, what's the point? Why is it here? What's it all about? How to get here? All of that information. But then also the information on the uninterrupted evolution of man. Not man turning from a monkey into a man. Not that type of evolution. Just eternal, uninterrupted progress. Infinite progress. Like non-impeded progress to the point where you don't take God's spot, you don't become him, but you have advanced to that level where you have all the knowledge and all of the understanding to the point that there's just nothing withheld from you anymore. You have as much knowledge as God has, and you have all the knowledge of how to put it into practice. And so that's what the symbolism, and taken in conjunction with this building of King Solomon's temple, when you unpack all that and get the information, that's what the information is. The complete philosophy of the creation of the world and of man, and then also the uninterrupted evolution, progress of man becoming like God. And if we go back to, just the very beginning of Genesis, God created man in his image and his likeness. And when man ate the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, God goes, man's like us now. Man's like me now. Man has knowledge of good and evil. That was a step to becoming more like God. So even just in the book of Genesis, and those just couple verses right there, you can pick up, okay, so God is designing man this way to progress to become like him. And also right here it says it has for its base the existence of God and the immortality of the soul. So again, kind of speaking to that same thing, the immortality of the soul being the living man, being immortal, eternal, like live forever. There's a death, but there's also a resurrection from that death, which is what this Jesus Christ thing is all about. God getting into a flesh body, living a mortal life, dying and resurrecting as him conquering death, and not just for himself, but for all of man. And it says right here, it recognizes man as the living temple of God. So we got King Solomon's temple being built right here for God to come dwell in. And the temple itself is not living. It's just made of stone and gold and like really, really nice materials, but it's not living. But God created this thing called man that is living. And it's not just a body, it's a temple for God's spirit to come dwell within. So that's literally part of our bodies and how we are designed and we're designed, is so that God's spirit can dwell within us. But just like you need all the principles and expertise and knowledge and patterns and blueprints that God gave David and David gave to Solomon in order to build this masterful temple out of stone, we need the information, the knowledge, the word, the patterns, the blueprints in order to live correctly, so that God comes and dwells inside of our temple. And then right here it also says it recognizes the Christos, or Christ, as the living principle of the soul of man, and without which no one can be immortal. So the dead center, the thing that is giving light and life to all men, is God, which is Jesus Christ. And all of these principles are eternal principles, meaning the same principles used to build perfect stone structures out of super heavy precious stones and gold and all of that. You got to have the information, the principles, the knowledge, the mastery of how to actually do that. And those same principles worked 4,000 years ago, and they'll work right now, and they'll work 4,000 years from now. They're eternal principles, unchanging. They will always work. And the same goes for the spiritual side of things, the things that work for God to come dwell inside of our bodies, eternal principles. They were the same ones 4,000 years ago. They're the same ones right now. They'll be the same ones 4,000 years from now. So the physical principles are eternal for building out of stone. And that's why Masonry is such a good example and reflection of the spiritual side, because same thing on the spiritual side. And that's why the scriptures, the word, the book of law is constantly using Masonry as the teacher to kind of show us, hey, physically what it takes for Masonry, all those principles and exactness, apply that same type of philosophy to the spiritual side of things, so that God can come dwell within your temple. Okay, and so all of this, King Solomon's temple is being built in Jerusalem, where the tribe of Judah is, and the other 11 tribes are in the Promised Land, but in other parts of the Promised Land, the tribe of Joseph, specifically in the Bethel Luce location, which is St. Louis, Missouri. So, but what happens right here is the other tribes of Israel depart from the tribe of Judah, because up until now they're all agreed that King David and then King Solomon are the king over all of the people. But now these other tribes are going, we don't want anything to do with the tribe of Judah anymore and what's going on in Jerusalem and this king over here. So we're going to separate and we're going to create our own king. And this is where, God had predicted that he's going to send the Israelites back into the promised land, but they're going to corrupt themselves and he's going to have to come wipe them out. And so that's what we'll start to read a little bit about right here. And this is, these dates will be not super important, but just to kind of help us get a feel for things is really all these dates are for. So this is happening at approximately 900 BC, where the tribes of Israel, which includes the tribe of Joseph, which is in Bethel, they separate from the tribe of Judah, which is the Jerusalem, David, Solomon, tribe of Judah, the Jews location. Okay, and now that the other tribes, are separating from the tribe of Judah, they start to do evil. And the tribe of Judah hangs on and does, lives righteously for a bit longer, but ultimately they start to be wicked again and they get wiped out. So everything we're about to read right now is basically all this is starting to get wiped out. But we're at 900 BC right here is when they separate. And they were physically already living in different locations. So it's not like they're physically separating locations now, because that was already the case. They were living in different spots. Now they're just saying, we don't want to be ruled by this king of this Judah, King David, King Solomon, Jerusalem. Like, we're just going to go off on our own and we're going to create our own king. And so 1 Kings 12:16 is where it talks about this. The people of the other tribes of Israel, it's just lumping them in as Israel right now. It says, what portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to thine own house, David. So they're looking, they're going, oh, King Solomon, King David, tribe of Judah, you guys got your promise in this location. We don't want it. Like, we're going to do our own thing now. Like, what inheritance do we have in that promise? Like, we're out of here now. And right here in 1 Kings 12:19, it says, Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. And 1 Kings 12:20 says, there was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. So all that's left for this David promise is the tribe of Judah in Jerusalem. All the other tribes now are off doing their own thing, and they create their own king. They pick their own king, and his name is Jeroboam, and he's the first king of this separated Israel, these other tribes, one of those tribes being the tribe of Joseph in the Bethel location. But this is Jeroboam's not the king of Jerusalem at all. There's Jerusalem, the tribe of Judah, they have their own king, and now Jeroboam is king of all the other tribes. And this is where things really start to go wrong, because this whole king thing wasn't supposed to happen in the first place. This was part of, like, when they were sent to the promised land, they were commanded, don't be like the other nations. And little by little, they started to be more like the other nations, to the point where now they have a king like the other nations, and it's not how it's supposed to go. God was supposed to be their king. It's even like that right now. God is literally supposed to be our king, and not our king in heaven, but actually our king on earth also. And that's just so that, but they just said, no, we don't want to do that. We want our own king. We want a man to be a king. And now they've separated from the tribe of Judah, and they're like, yeah, let's create another king. And well, this is part of the reason why, like, mainly it's supposed to be God, but then when you select man as kings, it just gets very problematic, as we see right here. So this new king, Jeroboam, says he made 2 calves of gold. We already saw that God got really mad the last time they started worshiping a gold calf. And now here's Jeroboam saying, here's 2 calves of gold. And he said to the people, behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. So what happened right here is King Jeroboam created a perverted or a corrupted religion. And he's lying and deceiving the people right now. He's saying, here's these 2 gold calves. This is what brought you out of Egypt. Which, no. The eagle's wings brought you out of Egypt. God brought you out. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jehovah, Jesus Christ, he brought you out of Egypt to the promised land. But here's King Jeroboam going, here's 2 golden calves, worship these. This is what brought you out of Egypt. It's a lie. It's corrupt. He's got them worshiping devils now at this point. And 1 Kings 13:1 says, there came a man out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. So what's happening right here is there's a man of God, because like I said, the tribe of Judah was still living righteously. So there's a man of God coming out of there, and he's coming to warn King Jeroboam and say, hey man, you're screwing things up. This is all going to lead to destruction if you don't stop. And what does King Jeroboam do? says he returned not from his evil ways, and then he doubled down and did things even more wickedly. 1 Kings 13:34, this thing became sin unto the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off and destroy it from off the face of the earth. So now it's like, yep, all right, your cup's just about full, and as soon as it's full, God's going to come and wipe everything out. And what we also start to see is, because now there's this king and he's an evil king and everything's just evil, there's no more protection from God anymore. When you start doing the evil stuff, when you stop doing the stuff God told you to do, and you start doing the stuff he told you not to do, it's just all trouble until it's full destruction. And that's what we see. So now there's this conspiracy going on, and let's just remember the tribe of Joseph is in the Bethel loose location, but there's also other tribes in other parts of the promised land as well. But we see right here that, so 2 Kings 15:1, so Jeroboam's king over the other tribes of Israel, but there began a new king to reign in Judah, tribe of Judah in Jerusalem, and it says that he did that which was right. So still Judah is doing things correctly. God's still happy with them so far. But over here, Jeroboam and the other tribes of Israel, they're not doing too well. And so then in 2 Kings 15:8, it says the son of Jeroboam starts to reign over Israel, and it tells us where he reigns from, where he's sitting in his throne, you could say. And that's in a place called Samaria. Again, we're not talking Middle East locations. I've laid that out previously. So we have the king of Judah ruling in Jerusalem, and currently we have the king of the other tribes of Israel ruling in Samaria. And it says he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And not only was he doing evil, it says he made Israel to sin just like his father was doing. So evil leadership causing the people to also be doing evil things. And then we just see this thing happening where it's just men conspiring to kill the king and take his position, and another one kills that king and takes his position. It's just this constantly people striving for, it's just killing and stealing is what we're seeing right here. And it's using the word conspiracy and conspired to explain this killing and stealing, just like had started with Lucifer and Cain in the garden, kill and steal, and you can do things that way. You don't have to actually do things the right way. You can just kill and steal, and you can get away with it. And that's what we see happening right here, and it's using the word conspire, conspiracy, as the kings are being killed and overthrown. Conspired against him, his conspiracy which he made, conspired against him, a conspiracy against. Now the tribes of Israel get booted from the promised land. Tribe of Judah still doing their thing in Jerusalem, but the other ones, they're getting booted now from the promised land, which is the land of Canaan, which is Mississippi Valley, which is Israel Valley, Israel being Jacob, Jacob's pillar, which sits right there on the Mississippi River, which all that water feeds that whole promised land. Mississippi Valley, Israel Valley. And this is now approximately 700 BC. So around 900 BC, there's that separation of the other tribes of Israel from the tribe of Judah. And now 700 BC, like really just a couple hundred years later, now all those other tribes are getting wiped out. But Judah's in Jerusalem is still hanging on for a little bit. So 2 Kings 17:18, the Lord was angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. So Israel did the things they weren't supposed to, and just like God had said and promised, and he has to keep his word, then he got very angry with them, and he removed them out of his sight. He kicked them off the land. And so to learn a little bit more about that, it says the king of Assyria came up against Samaria. Remember, Samaria is where the king of Israel, the other tribes of Israel, is currently sitting in his throne. Well, a different king of Assyria comes up against that king in Samaria and besieges it. This is part of the overthrow and the tribes of Israel, the other tribes of Israel getting kicked off the land. 2 Kings 18:11, right here, it specifically says, the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria. So king of Assyria shows up, conquers them, all the other tribes, carries them all away captive. And why? Because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded them. And they would not hear them nor do them. So they stopped doing the things they were supposed to. They started doing the things they were not supposed to. God wipes them out. And we learned that Bethel Luz, where the tribe of Joseph is at, the Jacob's pillar location, was at least partially destroyed. It mentions at least some destruction happening there. It doesn't say anything about a total wipeout. It says the people got carried away and there was some destruction that happened, but it doesn't say a total destruction. So Jacob's pillar standing and some other pieces could very well be. 2 Kings 23:5 says the altar that was at Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam built part of Jeroboam's wickedness was he built an altar, like he did this altar and high place thing, and anyways, those got demolished. It says the altar and the high place he brake down and burned the high place and stamped it small to powder and burned the grove. So those things, the high place, the altar and the grove, those were definitely fully destroyed and turned to powder. Amos 5:5, we learn a little bit more that, you know, destruction was definitely coming to Bethel, to Luz, because it says, seek not Bethel, Bethel shall come to naught. Meaning, don't try and go there, it's not worth it, it's going to be left in bad condition. Seek the Lord and ye shall live, lest he shall break out like fire in the house of Joseph and devour it, and there be none to quench it in Bethel. So again, speaking to, there's going to be destruction in Bethel where the tribe of Joseph is at, the house of Joseph. And we're going to see in just a second that the tribe of Joseph does return to the Bethel Luz location, because isn't that the pattern we've seen over and over again? Here, I'll take you there, give you a shot, you're not doing what I told you to do, I boot you, take you back there, give you a shot, you're not doing what I told you to do, boot you, and that just keeps happening. That's God's promise, like Abraham, he said, for forever, like your seed for forever. So he's always doing it, he's always bringing that seed back, and we're going to see that again. Right now, we're seeing them getting booted again, but we're going to see them come back again. And then now we see that Jerusalem gets conquered, because Israel, they got conquered, they got swept away. Tribe of Judah in Jerusalem, they were righteous for longer, but they didn't hold it together and eventually started doing wicked to the point where God goes, yep, okay, now time to destroy the tribe of Judah, Jerusalem location. But there's one interesting part of this, which is there's a remnant that escapes, which is going to be basically this presentation from here forward is going to be talking about that remnant that escapes out of Jerusalem. And now this is happening approximately 600 BC. So about 900 BC, they separate the other tribes of Israel from the tribe of Judah. About 700 BC, 200 years later, the tribes of Israel get kicked off the land. And then about 100 years later from that, these are rough estimates, but they're, you know, not too far off. About 100 years later from that, so now we're at 600 BC. Now the tribe of Judah in Jerusalem is getting conquered and carried away, except for one remnant that we're going to read about. And it's the king of Babylon that comes and destroys Jerusalem, but he doesn't just destroy it, he also pillages it, which I've talked about. These buildings, these stone buildings and all the precious materials and everything, like, yeah, like there's people that definitely want to destroy it, but as or before they destroy it, let's pillage and take all the goods that we can out of it. And that's what we see happening right here. So the king of Babylon comes and destroys Jerusalem. 2 Kings 25:1, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem. They pitched against it, and they built forts against it round about. And it says, the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. Besieged meaning like he's camped out all around the city. He hasn't fully like come in and destroyed it yet, but it's like he's sitting there just waiting and kind of holding them in, and they can't really go anywhere or do anything. But then he does eventually get into the city and actually conquer it and just burn it. 2 Kings 25:9, he burnt the house of the Lord, the king's house, all the houses of Jerusalem, and every man's house burnt he with fire. 2 Kings 25:11, it says that the rest of the people that were left in the city and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon with the remnant of the multitude were carried away by the captain of the guard. Okay, so right here it's saying the word remnant. This isn't the remnant that I'm talking about. There's a remnant that fully gets to escape. Right here it's just talking about the people that were left in the city, like the people that were still there. Those people got carried away captive into Babylon. And it's not just the people that they carried away, but 2 Kings 25:13, the pillars of brass and the bases and the brazen sea, and they broke it all in pieces, and they carried the brass to Babylon. It also says the pots, shovels, snuffers, spoons, vessels of brass, they took them away, carried them away to Babylon. The fire pans, the bowls, such the things as were of gold, of silver, in silver, the captain of the guard took away. So this is the pillaging. They're pillaging all the precious, nice materials that they can carry and get away with taking, and they're taking it all. So the king of Babylon smote them and slew them, and Judah was carried away out of their land. So the people that were left alive carried them away, all the precious stuff, pillaged and took all that away, and then just set everything on fire and destroyed it. So the tribes of Israel, including the tribe of Joseph in Bethel Luz, carried away. Tribe of Judah, which was in Jerusalem, David and Solomon's location, carried away. So now at this point, all the tribes have been carried away, swept off the land, except for the remnant, which we're going to talk about right now. Because there's a prophet in the Old Testament named Isaiah who prophesied that this was going to happen. 2 Kings 19:30, the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall yet again take root downward and bear fruit upward. So right here is talking about there's a remnant that's going to escape out of Judah, out of Jerusalem, and they're going to take root downward and bear fruit upward, which I'm going to say is going back to that promised location, God fulfilling his ancient covenant. He's given them another chance. He's going to take them back there to the Bethel loose location. He's going to allow them to take root downward and bear fruit upward. So prosper in the land again. So in 2 Kings 19:31, it says, out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. So again, it's saying out of Jerusalem, out of the tribe of Judah location, a remnant's going to escape. It's going to go forth, and the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. So God's going to do this, and it's giving us this word zeal, which I think clues us into what's going on here. Zeal, if we look at the definition, it means great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective, like keeping an ancient covenant. So I think that's, and we're going to see that this is the case, but I think that's what's going on here is like the zeal of the Lord of hosts, this anxiousness, this enthusiasm, this, I got to keep this ancient covenant. He's going to escape this remnant out of Jerusalem that's going to take root downward and bear fruit upward again. And then we learn even more about this remnant that's escaping in Isaiah 65:9, where it says, I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains. Mine elect shall inherit it, and my servants shall dwell there. So this remnant that's escaping out of Judah is also a seed out of Jacob. And this seed of Jacob that's escaping out of the Judah, Jerusalem location is exactly what the Book of Mormon's talking about. That's what the whole Book of Mormon is. That's where it starts, and that's the whole story it's telling, is that during the reign of Zedekiah, when Jerusalem was about to be destroyed, God comes to this family and says, hey, I got a plan for you. I'm going to escape you, and I'm going to take you to the promised land. I'm going to take you to the Jacob spot. I'm going to take you to the Joseph of Egypt spot. And so that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is. And so the Book of Mormon is a continuation of the ancient covenant. It's God taking another family back to the promised location, some of the seed of Jacob, some of the seed of Joseph, back to Bethel loose, giving them another shot. And so the Book of Mormon is a continuation of that ancient covenant, and it also does a great job at explaining the continuation of the ancient conspiracy as well. And it helps us understand exactly where we are at nowadays. And I'm going to show you in just a second some of the first verses of the Book of Mormon where we start to learn about some of this. But before we go there, just a quick side note and clarification, because I think some people who know the Old Testament well would kind of be like, whoa, what about this? And so I just want to point this out. In 2 Kings 19, the king of Assyria was, and we're also going to learn a little bit about the ancient conspiracy right here. But in 2 Kings 19, it says the king of Assyria was threatening to conquer Jerusalem. But God said specifically at that time that the king of Assyria isn't going to pull that off. He's not going to be the one to conquer and destroy Jerusalem. So Isaiah wasn't prophesying about a remnant being saved from that king of Assyria trying to conquer Jerusalem. It's specifically referring to, because it was the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and that whole thing, that's what actually conquered Jerusalem and carried them away. So Isaiah's prophecies are definitely referring to that specific time period, because that is the only time period where we see that Judah and Jerusalem got fully destroyed and carried away. And so Isaiah's prophesying about a remnant escaping from Jerusalem when Jerusalem actually got conquered, which was around 600 BC, the King Nebuchadnezzar conquest. And this is the verse right here. It says, 2 Kings 19:10, Jerusalem shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. So that take on things, it just wouldn't work. But we do learn a bit from the king of Assyria about this ancient conspiracy, which part of it is to lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps and dry up the waters. So remember it talked about huge fenced cities, walls up to heaven, giants living in them, built them. Like these are incredible stone cities, like big stone cities. And this part of this ancient conspiracy is to tumble them into ruinous heaps and then also dry up the waters. And this is what the king of Assyria, we learn this from the king of Assyria. And we'll see this much more play out in the Book of Mormon, when the king of Assyria was threatening to conquer Jerusalem, he said, and had already conquered a lot of different cities at this point. Like, he was being very successful. That's why he was so sure he was going to conquer Jerusalem. But then God's like, no, not the king of Assyria. He's not going to be the one. But the king of Assyria says, I have digged and drunk strange waters, and with the sole of my feet have I dried up the river of besieged places. So he's talking about these places that he has besieged, he's taken over. He dries up the rivers. And then this verse right here, 2 Kings 19:25, clues us into how the king of Assyria had tapped into the ancient conspiracy that started with Lucifer and Cain, which is kill, pillage, steal. And it says right here, haven't you heard how long ago I formed it? I've done it, and of ancient times I've formed it. Now I've brought it to pass that thou shouldest be to lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. So when it's talking about of it being formed of ancient times, that's Lucifer and Cain. That's starting it right there, kill and still. And it's part of that kill and still is to also lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. These big stone cities and kingdoms, turn them into ruinous heaps, which I'm going to show you some examples of this, but also how are you going to do that? This is super heavy, thick stone. You're not taking your pickaxes and tumbling it. So like, this is just another point where it's not poor dirt people. Like, these are very advanced, prosperous, rich people. And to tumble the type of stuff that they're building, you need some serious machinery, equipment, bombs, whatever it may be. Like, you're not just tumbling this stuff that easily. But it does say that they do it. They lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. So now let's look at some wasted fenced cities in ruinous heaps in Old Jerusalem, Utah. Because remember, I laid out the Middle East is a hoax location. I haven't fully laid out all the reasons why Utah is their correct location. I have laid out some previously. Moab, Moses standing on Mount Nebo, Jordan River is there, which I'll get to talking about. There's a lot more too. But here's just a look at some old ancient stone cities in Utah that are sitting in ruin, in heaps of ruin. So this is Bryce Canyon, Utah. You can see this big stone arch right here. Of course, the stories of these are of the stone arches across the country, is they're all natural stone arches, like 300 billion years of tectonic plates shifting and glaciers slowly drifting, and then you just get these stone arches. Or were there civilizations here prior to us that built extremely advanced stone architecture, and now a lot of it's sitting in ruin, and this is just a ruin, an old stone architecture arch sitting in ruin. I'm gonna go with that one. If we look at this picture of Bryce Canyon, there's just all this very interesting tower work right here, which I don't believe is a natural Mother Nature created it. I think basically Mother Nature isn't real. That's what I think. I think that's just a way to explain all the ancient leftovers all over the world, specifically in the United States of America. Just say Mother Nature created it 300 billion years ago. Who's gonna know any better? Who's gonna be able to analyze 300 billion years and how this all like? But if you read the word, the book of law, the scriptures, it's saying these people were massive stone builders and a lot of their stuff sitting in ruin. So when you look at all this stone stuff sitting all over your country, it's probably just architecture sitting in ruin. And here's another piece of Bryce Canyon where I think that's pretty obvious. This is just old architecture sitting in ruin, built by a civilization that was masterful at building in stone, pyramids, arches, towers, all of that. And also you'll notice that this is completely dry desert land now, because the waters have also been dried up. So you've got ruinous heaps of old stone cities in dry places. Exactly like the scriptures, the book of law, the word is saying that's what the ancient conspiracy does. Here's a look at some pyramids sitting in ruin in Capitol Reef, Utah. Here's a look at some more in Capitol Reef, Utah. This one specifically I would say is a castle, and you can see like some castle spires, cathedral spires type of thing. And what do they call it? Well, they call it the castle. And they do this lots of times where the name is actually telling you what's actually going on. But because we believe what we're taught in the schools and stuff, we don't look at this and go, yeah, that's an ancient castle. We go, oh, 300 billion years of Mother Nature building this. And then also you'll find a sign in Capitol Reef for the pyramid that's there. Like that's because that's what these places actually are. They're old ancient castles and pyramids sitting in ruin. This is a look at Silver City, Utah. You can see right here, just old stone structure, and the farther you go up, it's just more covered in dirt and shrubbery. But all that mountain range that you see back behind there is just more of this same structure right here that we see exposed. And you can see that there's, tunnels going back into the mountain, and whenever you try and walk into those tunnels, it's all sealed up. You can only go like a few feet into it, but pretty obvious right here to tell. And especially if you get out there and you just excavate some dirt, it's just more and more of this. And they say it's just old mining cities, which I think that's a partial truth. I think they did come and mine or pillage all of the precious stuff that was still left in these old castles and mountains, pyramids. So here in Moab, Utah, again, just completely dry desert because the water's been dried up. Here's some old castle structure right here sitting in ruin. And I'll make this even more obvious, but you can see the lines of where the stone was stacked level, and then the terracing to it. And then you can see the tops of the architecture still look exactly like some of the tops of architecture we see nowadays. Just like this right here, this stepped up into a triangle shape. And then you got this one right here, same thing. And you can see the terraces, the levels, and you can make out the straight lines from where all the stones were stacked perfectly straight, but it's just in ruin now. But look at this shape right here, and then look at some of these buildings. These are mission homes in California, and it's just the same thing. It's those same shapes. This is just a much older, bigger version of it that's sitting in ruin. It's old castle walls. And that's what Moab, that whole land of Moab in Utah, that's what all of the stone out there is. It's just all old ancient cities sitting in ruin. That was just a little bit more about the ancient conspiracy. Upcoming video, I'll lay it all out very much in depth. But now let's talk a little bit about the Book of Mormon. Like I explained, this is the ancient covenant and the ancient conspiracy continuing. This is literally the seed of Joseph, the seed of Jacob, God taking them back to the Bethel loose location to give them another shot. And the Book of Mormon starts in approximately 600 BC, right when Jerusalem was about to be destroyed. And this is several hundred years after the people in Jerusalem, well, really the other tribes of Israel separated from the people in Jerusalem. So if those other tribes separated and these people are in Jerusalem, and now we're 300 years later and all these other tribes had already been swept away, then it's very possible that we can see right here a remnant escaping from Jerusalem, which is also the seed of Jacob and the seed of Joseph, being taken back to that Bethel loose location where those people that were already there previously had already been wiped away. And so the Book of Mormon is structured in the same way the Bible is, where you got different books, and then inside each book you've got chapters and then verses inside of those chapters. So this is the very first verse of the first chapter of the Book of Mormon, and we learn about a man named Nephi. And Nephi's the son of a man named Lehi. So we're going to talk about Lehi and Nephi for a second, but Nephi's the main one that we'll talk about moving forward. And we'll also talk about his lineage, his descendants, and they'll be known as the Nephites. Just like Jacob's name got changed to Israel and all his kids became known as Israelites, just this ites thing, just to describe the children of him. We'll see that same thing happening with Nephi, where his posterity is known as the Nephites. The second verse of the Book of Mormon says, "I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians." And so Nephi right here is telling us, and he lived in Jerusalem, but he escaped right before it got destroyed. And then he started making some records of his, of everything that's going on. And he's saying, I'm doing it in the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians, because that's what he knew. That's the customs and the languages that he knew, because he was born and raised in Jerusalem. And we're going to see that where God ends up taking them is to this Bethel loose location, St. Louis, Missouri. And if we look at the Nebraska capital right here, I've shown you this several times. This is apparently Moses and Akhenaton right here, an Egyptian pharaoh. And if we look a little bit lower, well, there's all this Egyptian writing also right there. And here's a much better look at it. This is on the exterior of the Nebraska Capitol building, which the stories about this and when it was built and all that just aren't true. And I would say Nephi is probably the one who built this stuff. Talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to point out here, Nephi is saying language of the Egyptians, and the Book of Mormon that Joseph Smith translated, which I'll get to that. We'll talk about the origin and Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon in a little bit. Right now, I just want to show the first little bits of what the Book of Mormon is actually talking about. But when he got the gold plates and translated it into the Book of Mormon, the language was an Egyptian language. And then, so you got Nephi right here, his recordings are in Egyptian, and then Joseph Smith is supposedly translating ancient Egyptian records that say this is the promised land. And then you got on the Nebraska Capitol an Egyptian pharaoh and all the other Old Testament symbolism and people, and then you got just straight up Egyptian writing in stone. So very interesting. We'll talk, like I just said, we'll talk about the origin of the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and the gold plates and translating it. We'll talk about all that in an upcoming video. But right here in the 4th verse of the Book of Mormon, it says, in the commencement of the 1st year of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. Zedekiah is the king when Nebuchadnezzar comes and takes over. It says that Nephi's father, Lehi, having dwelt in Jerusalem all his days, and it says in that same year there came prophets prophesying unto the people that they must repent or the great city Jerusalem must be destroyed. So we learn that they're living in the Zedekiah time period. In the 1st year that Zedekiah becomes king, we also learn that Lehi had been living in Jerusalem all his life. Lehi is the father of Nephi, and that there came prophets into Jerusalem saying, hey, everybody, repent, turn things around, or everything's about to get destroyed. And again, this is at approximately 600 BC. If we look at the Old Testament, Jeremiah 1:3 says, in the 11th year of Zedekiah, that's when Jerusalem was carried away captive. So Nephi, Lehi, and their family, they escape a little bit before that actually happens. Just like was predicted, 2 Kings 19:31, out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant. They're going to escape out of Mount Zion, and the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Nephi 1:5 says, wherefore it came to pass that my father Lehi, as he went forth, prayed unto the Lord, yea, with all his heart in behalf of his people. So Lehi starts praying for the people, hoping that there can be some repentance so Jerusalem doesn't have to get destroyed. He believes the prophets when they come saying these things. And as he's praying, it says that there came a pillar of fire and dwelt upon a rock before Lehi. And it says that he saw and heard much. And because of the things which he saw and heard, he did quake and tremble exceedingly. So just like we saw in reading in the Old Testament, and this is still those same time periods, we're 600 BC still, and we're actually in Jerusalem right now. Lehi's praying, and there's a pillar of fire that on a rock in front of him, and he starts to see and hear things. God's telling him some things, and they cause him to get quite scared, is what it's saying. And it says that he then begins to go forth among the people and began to prophesy and to declare unto them the things which he had both seen and heard. So now Lehi himself is going out and saying, hey guys, yeah, this stuff's coming, it's about to happen, like we need to change things around. And it says when the Jews heard these things, they got mad at him, and even to the point where they sought to take his life away. And so at that point, it says that the Lord commanded Lehi in a dream that he should take his family and depart into the wilderness. So he's saying, Lehi, grab your family, time for you to escape. This is all going to get destroyed. They're trying to kill you. Time for you to get out of here. It says they traveled for 3 days in the wilderness and pitched his tent in a valley by the side of a river of water. And it came to pass that he built an altar of stones and made an offering unto the Lord. Again, same thing as before. Is this just a stone bench? Is he building something nicer than a stone bench? He's living in a tent. Is his tent nice? Like, we'll see that the Lehi and Nephi and their family become extremely industrious and extremely prosperous, and they do seem to already know how to build some things. Is this like an Iowa Capitol building that they're building right here? Is it a stone bench? I don't really know, but again, I think they just left Jerusalem where everything's super beautiful, King Solomon's temple, all of that. So I think they're much more inclined to actually be really good stonemasons and build some nice stuff here. But either way, once again, we see, just like we saw these other people that God says, okay, I'm grabbing you and I'm taking you back to the promised land. That's what we're starting to see here, is God's grabbing Lehi and his family and starting to lead them back to the promised land. And we see Lehi doing the same thing, building an altar, being a mason. And because this is still 600 BC, they're just still doing their best to live the law of Moses. And they also, Lehi has 2 other children. So Nephi is one of his sons, but then Nephi has 2 brothers named Laman and Lemuel. And Nephi was pretty much like, yeah, I believe Lehi, like I believe my father. I'm okay with leaving Jerusalem. Laman and Lemuel, they murmured a lot. They weren't really about it, didn't really want to do it. For some reason, though, they did go and they did leave, but they were just basically constantly problematic and complaining, like much like how kind of like the Israelites complained about stuff and God had to get mad at them for that. Laman and Lemuel are very much like that, and we'll learn a lot more about them moving forward. This family is actually where our Native Americans come from. We'll get to that though. Okay, so and just like I explained how Nephi's children become known as the Nephites, the children of Laman and Lemuel, they become known as the Lamanites. We'll get more to that. We'll talk a lot more about that moving forward though. 2 Nephi 2:19 says, "It came to pass that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Blessed art thou, Nephi, because of thy faith, for thou hast sought me diligently with lowliness of heart." So Nephi he just tried to seek God. He tried to stay humble, and as he did that, he was blessed because of it. And God blessed him because of it. And he says to Nephi, "You'll be led to a land of promise, yea, even a land which I have prepared for you, yea, a land which is choice above all other lands." God is saying there's this land that's better than all of the other ones. This is the most choice spot. It's the spot, and I'm going to take you there, and I'm promising it to you. It's a land of promise for you. It's the Jacob spot, where Jacob said, "Oh, how dreadful is this place. Oh, I didn't realize where I'm at. Oh, this is the house of God. I'm naming this place Bethel. It's the house of God. It's the gate between heaven and earth. Jacob's pillar, Jacob's ladder." That's what Nephi is receiving in promise right here. And it's going to lay this out more clearly for us, but that's what's going on right here is God's saying to Nephi, "I'm taking you to that spot, the most choice spot above all the other spots, the Jacob's pillar, God's house, gate location. That's where I'm taking you. Luz, Bethel is where I'm taking you." But before they can fully start to head that direction, God says, "Actually, I need you to go back to Jerusalem to grab something." And the thing that they need to go grab is what's called the brass plates, which on the brass plates talks about Joseph of Egypt, which we're going to read a little bit more about right here. But it says that the Lord comes to Lehi in a dream again and commands him that he needs to send his sons back to Jerusalem to get the brass plates. And they need to get them from a man named Laban, who was in charge of them at the time. It says, "Laban hath the record of the Jews, and also a genealogy of my forefathers, and they are engraven upon the plates of brass." So a big part of this story that's often talked about in the Mormon church is they were sent back to get the brass plates because the brass plates had the commandments, the law of Moses on them. And that's definitely true. That's definitely part of it. But there's this huge other chunk that really just doesn't get talked about, which is even more of the main reason why why God sent them back to go get these brass plates. And it's because of what it says right here. It has the genealogy of my forefathers, the genealogy of Lehi's forefathers. It has Lehi's genealogy, which we'll learn about in just a second. But it says, 1 Nephi 3:4, "Thou and thy brothers should go into the house of Laban and seek the records and bring them down into the wilderness." Amazing story of how they're actually able to acquire those brass plates. Not going to get into that right now. Just going to skip to the part where they've acquired them and they're back in the wilderness, and they go to the tent of their father Lehi, and he's very happy, and he starts to dive into the records and study them. And it says, "Lehi took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and he did search them from the beginning." He started to study them out. And it says, "He beheld that they did contain the 5 books of Moses, which gave an account of the creation of the world, and also of Adam and Eve, who were our first parents, and also a record of the Jews from the beginning, even down to the commencement of Zedekiah, king of Judah." So it has a record from the beginning all the way up to King Zedekiah. But then what it also has is it says, Lehi also found upon the plates of brass a genealogy of his fathers. Wherefore he knew that he was a descendant of Joseph. Yea, even that Joseph, which was the son of Jacob, who was sold into Egypt. Huge. Remember, Nephi is getting this promise, "I'm taking you to the most choice spot." And God's going, "Hey, I need you guys to go back and grab these plates of brass." And when Lehi reads them, he goes, "Oh, we're the seed of Joseph." So here's this seed of Joseph, this seed of Jacob, this remnant that just escaped out of Judah, Jerusalem, and God's saying, "Here's this promise to take you to the most special place. You're descendants of Joseph. What's going on here?" This is God again grabbing the seed of Joseph, the seed of Abraham, the seed of Jacob, taking you back to Bethel Luz. And Lehi's reading the brass plates and he goes, "Oh, we are the descendants of Joseph. We are that ancient covenant continuing. That's what's going on right here. That's why these plates were important for us. We are the seed of Joseph. God's grabbing us as part of this ancient covenant and taking us back to the Bethel Luz the covenant location. It says it again, 1 Nephi 5:16. Lehi did discover the genealogy of his fathers, and Laban was also a descendant of Joseph, wherefore he and his fathers had kept the records. So that's why Laban had these plates, is because he was also a descendant of Joseph. So really what happened here is the seed of Joseph was commanded to go grab the records of the seed of Joseph so that they would not get destroyed in the destruction of Jerusalem. So they're still in the hands of the seed of Joseph, being taken to the covenant seed of Joseph, seed of Jacob, whose name is Israel, seed of Abraham location, Jacob's pillar spot, Bethel Luz. So Lehi, the seed of Joseph, Jacob, Israel, is escaping Jerusalem, the Judah location, headed to the promised land, just like was prophesied by Isaiah in the Old Testament, out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant. And it's the zeal of the Lord of hosts that's going to do this, the great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective, like keeping an ancient covenant intact. So Lehi, the seed of Joseph, is returning to Bethel Luz, the Joseph-Jacob spot. And we just read a few hundred years earlier, or a couple hundred years earlier, whatever that timeline is, that the seed of Joseph was in the Bethel Luz location and they got swept out. But what happens? What does God always do? Let's grab seed of Joseph, bring it back there, give it another shot. That's what's happening right here. Lehi, Nephi, the seed of Joseph, is being taken back to the most choice spot, the Bethel Luz spot that was promised to Jacob and Joseph. And just a reminder that Bethel Luz is St. Louis, Missouri, where there's the pillar with Jacob's ladder, the gate, the gateway arch, and the mighty river that feeds the whole promised land. So what's happening here is the covenant is continuing. And just in case there was any confusion about this, Lehi did an extra, he just laid it out. He's like, oh, had to go get the brass plates because we're the seed of Joseph. Nephi's getting the promised land promise. Like, in case there's any confusion in the future, any deception, he also does this. Lehi begat 2 sons in the wilderness, and he named the oldest one Jacob and the younger one Joseph. Because he knows what's happening right here. He knows, oh, we're the seed of Joseph, we're the seed of Jacob. God's picked us to continue his covenant, his ancient promise that he made to Abraham. We're that. And we're headed back to the promised land now. We're headed back to the Bethel Luz location, the most choice spot above all the other locations on earth. And just to clarify, in case it didn't sit clearly enough already, I'm naming my children on my way there, the 2 sons I have on my way to the promised land. I named them Jacob and the other one Joseph. Jacob and Joseph, because they're fulfilling the covenant that God made to Jacob and Joseph. And they are the seed of Jacob and Joseph, returning to the location that was promised to Jacob and Joseph, which is St. Louis, Missouri. Isaiah 65:9, I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah. This is the seed of Joseph, the seed of Jacob, coming out of Judah, coming out of Jerusalem, headed to the elect spot where God's people are meant to inherit that location. And it says in 1 Nephi 5:17, when my father saw all these things, when he read the brass plates and he saw what was going on, it says he was filled with the Spirit and he began to prophesy concerning his seed. So he realized what's going on. He sees the future of his seed, how this all plays out, and he starts to prophesy and tell Nephi and Laman and Lemuel and also his wife what this is all about. And he says these brass plates should go forth unto all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people who are of his seed. And these brass plates, we're reading part of it right now in the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Mormon has gone worldwide. This has happened. These brass plates, some of the stories on them, the teachings, what's going on, this has already been happening. Wherefore it was wisdom in the Lord that we should carry them with us as we journeyed in the wilderness towards the land of the promise. So it wasn't just wisdom in the Lord because the brass plates had the commandments and they need to keep the commandments. It's also because this ancient covenant is continuing and the seed of Joseph is headed back to the promised location. And that's also one of the main reasons why these brass plates were so important. And we learn that the land where they're headed is a land which the Lord God hath covenanted with me to be a land for the inheritance of my seed. Yea, the Lord hath covenanted this land unto me and to my children forever, and also those who should be led out of other countries by the hand of the Lord. Lehi here, straight up saying it. God's covenanted with me, the seed of Joseph, this land for the inheritance of all my seed. Just like it was promised to Joseph of Egypt and Jacob and Abraham. This is just the continuation. This is just the next man and his family that God's taking to that location to continue the seed of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph in that location that was promised to them. And along with that, he's also given the same warnings that were given to all of them when they're being taken back to this land. It says, when the time cometh that they shall dwindle in unbelief. So they're not even being warned. Remember it says Lehi burst out into prophecy about his seed. So he already knows how this is going to play out. God's already shown him, just like we saw when he was sending the Israelites back there. He's like, you're going to corrupt yourselves. Lehi's seeing all that, and he's telling us about it. And so he's saying, when the time cometh that they shall dwindle in unbelief, they're going to get there, they're going to do good and prosper for a second, live righteously, and then they're going to start to not do the things they're supposed to do and start to be evil, and then there's going to come another wipeout. So it says, once they start to dwindle in unbelief, they stop believing in the things of God, after they've received so great blessings from the hand of the Lord, having a knowledge of the creation of the earth and all men, knowing the great and marvelous works of the Lord from the beginning, from the creation of the world, having power given them to do all things by faith, having all commandments from the beginning, having been brought by his infinite goodness into this precious land of promise. Behold, I say, if the day shall come that they will reject the Holy One of Israel, the true Messiah, their Redeemer and their God, behold, the judgments of him that is just shall rest upon them. They're going to be super blessed. They're getting all of God's good stuff. If they stop doing God's things, boom, here comes destruction. Here comes God's judgments. And it says, as part of that, he will bring other nations unto them, and he will give unto them power, and he will take away from them the lands of their possessions, and he will cause them to be scattered and smitten. So what's happening here, what's being prophesied is Lehi and Nephi and Laman and Lemuel, they're all going to the promised land, and they're going to populate it, and they're going to live super righteous for a bit, and then they're going to get wicked. And then it's saying that, just like God always does, he said, okay, I'm going to come and destroy things, but the destruction is giving us some more specifics. It's saying that other nations are going to come. He's going to give them the power to take it over, to take over the land. And as part of that, he's going to scatter the people that are still here. They're going to scatter the people that are still living on the land. They're going to take the land and from the people living there, and they're going to scatter those people throughout into other places. That's the Native American Indians, as we think of it, as we've been told. The people that were living in the Promised Land, the United States of America, as we now call it, the Mississippi Valley area, when the white man showed up, when Spanish showed up, that's exactly what it's talking about right here. That those Native American Indians are the descendants of Nephi and Laman and Lemuel. Lehi, Nephi, Laman, and Lemuel. That is actually the seed of Joseph still in these lands. And then the punishments come because they stopped living how they were supposed to. And that's the Spanish conquest showing up in the late 1400s, early 1500s, taking their land and scattering them, which is exactly what happened. So the Native Americans, as we think about it, are literally just Lamanites and Nephites. That simple. And the Lamanites and Nephites is the seed of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem. So that remnant prophesied by Isaiah in the Old Testament that would escape out of Jerusalem would take root downward and bear fruit upward. Okay, those people, the descendants of those people, that the seed of Jacob, that of Joseph that still existed in the Promised Land, that's the Native American Indians. That's who the white man showed up, took their land in the 1400s, 1500s, and scattered them. And we haven't gotten to this part yet, but it also says in the Book of Mormon that the white man's going to do that, and then the white man's going to prosper in the land for a little bit, but then the white man, that nation's going to start to do evil, and then it will be given back again to that seed of Joseph that had gotten scattered, which is what we're seeing exactly right now. All these nations, I mean, like I grew up in California, it's over 50% Hispanic now. It's not American anymore. It's been given back to this seed of Joseph that got scattered. These Nephites and Lamanites that were the seed of Joseph that were here when the British Empire showed up, they got scattered, and then the white man broke off from the British Empire and prospered here for a little bit. But then now, since we've stopped doing things as God has told us, since we've stopped in large part worshiping Jesus Christ, now our lands are being given away to these other nations that are coming in, which is the seed of Joseph that was kicked off this land a few hundred years ago or whatever. They're getting it back now, and that's exactly what's happening. Even in places where you don't think, it's like the signs are in English and in Spanish. It's like those are the two languages because there's these other nations that are coming and they're getting their land back. That's just what's happening because we haven't been following Jesus Christ like we're supposed to. So, as always, God brings in another people to wipe out the people who aren't living correctly, and it's given to a different people, and they're given a shot again. So the Native Americans, and that's why in the Nebraska Capitol building, I said we'd come back and talk about, it looks like Native Americans, but it's also like Egyptian, and it looks a lot nicer and more prosperous and richer than Native Americans in dirt and teepees. And that's because the Native Americans are actually the seed of Joseph, that remnant that escaped out of Judah and was taken back to the Promised Land. And then, as Lehi prophesied, and as God has always said, when they start to do evil, they'll get wiped off. And so that's what happened. That's where the Native Americans are. That's who they are and where they come from, is they are the seed of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem and came and prospered in these lands until they stopped following God, and then he scattered them and gave their lands away to a different nation. That's the end of video 7. We're going to pick this up in the next one.